thing that I want you to look at again is the Energizing Young Voters website, because that's where you can find everything that we talk about today and everything that you may have questions about in the future. Again, for the people who were not here yesterday, what we do has 3 different pages on it, and you can get at it either from this tab or from these 3 icons. I'm going to go to the one for League of Women Voters first, because one of the questions we always get is, how do you get started? There's a lot of other information on here, and actually yesterday one of our interns added the issue agnosticism policy, so you can actually see the wording of it. But if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there is a how-to. And the very bottom on the left-hand side is making a presentation. How do you do it? Start. And there is a checklist, and you can just go through it one after the other and feel very confident that you've got a guideline to get you into a school and to get your program up and running or your lesson up and running without a lot of hassle. There are also a whole bunch of things on voting that are useful for league members to hand out if they're doing a voter registration drive, or if they're working in schools. Like the first time voter checklist is something that I take when I'm working in high schools so that kids have it. It can also be found on vote411.org, which is the league's website. Okay, so that is for leagues to pay attention to. But today, like yesterday, we're going to go to the Educators and Community Groups tab. And when we scroll down, yesterday we looked at the lessons that were on the Fighting for the Vote side. Today, what we're looking at is the Fighting for Change side. The first module is called What's Your Issue? And when you click on the plus, there's just a little description of what that is. And then you, again, can view the video from the last training session. And this one will be on it the next time, probably next week. And you can also view the module. And that is also true of IAM the change. And IAM altogether is not a typo. It's the acronym for Inform, Act, and Monitor. But it talks about how do you actually bring about the change. And again, there's the video and the module. And then this is what we're going to be doing later this week when we learn how to talk across the political divide without, with civility, without animosity, and without the dissension that is so present in today's world. So let's go back, and here we are, Fighting for Change. Module 1 is What's Your Issue? You go to View Module, and this time you'll see that there are 2 tabs. One is high school and college, and the other one is middle school, and you can see the beginning of the word modified. I'm going to show you what is there first. So you have the middle school script, and you have the middle school slides. And then this is a poll that is used during the lesson. So it's there for you if you want to look at it separately, but there's also a link on the slide that will take you directly to it when you're working with the kids. The students from Drew University who did the Spanish version of Fighting for the Vote also created a Spanish version of What's Your Issue? I Am the Change for middle school, because some of them went into Dover, New Jersey's middle school, and that's an almost entirely Hispanic community at this point in time. So they presented it in what they call Spanglish. They did both. The slides for this one are not in Spanish yet, but they will be working on those, and those slides will also be available. But at least if the teacher is working with a totally Spanish-speaking group, the teacher has the Spanish transcript there that they can use. Okay, so the middle school one, the biggest difference, what you will go through today, you will see some of these very same slides, because I'm going to use the high school and college version with you. So you'll see those slides. But when you get to use the materials, those slides in the version you and I are going to use will be grayed out, because you don't need to look at them again. The biggest difference is when we get to the point where the kids are taking action, we've learned that middle school kids do not know how to write a letter. And communicating with your legislators either requires that or it requires a formal email, which is very much like a letter, and they honestly don't know how to do it. It's not that, that they're dumb or anything. It's just that it's never been a part of they haven't needed it before. So we've decided that for them, we would walk through the process of writing a formal email so that they would at least have that experience and know the difference from what happens when they send it to a friend and when you're sending it to a legislator. Everything else in the lesson is also included in the high school version. But in the high school and college version, we don't have to teach them how to write a letter or formal email. Instead, we actually give them practice in either doing that or in writing a 3-minute speech that you might give in front of, like, when you're testifying or when you go to a board meeting or a municipal council meeting or something like that. So that's the major difference between the two. The middle school version is supposed to take about 45 minutes. When the kids taught it in Dover, they found that it took longer, and I'm not sure exactly why. But what I would suggest doing is, if you're going to use the middle school version, do a practice run yourself first and time it so that you can go back and you can change whatever, take out a slide or take out an activity that you think is less critical for those kids to have. So that's the discussion about the middle school version. So let me go back now to the web page, and we're going to look at the high school and the college version. All right, so this is the high school and college version. There are, again, slides, hidden intellectual property slides. Because in this program, there are some video clips, and you can see down in slide 7, that's where the 4 video clips are, 2 of which relate to left-leaning issues and 2 of which relate to right-leaning issues. And we're going to show you all 4 of them. But in order to hear that, you need to click on 2 small boxes before you share your screen. One says make for audio. Let me tell you what it says. The exact words. One says share sound. That's the one that's most important. And the other one says optimize for video clip. So I need to check those 2 boxes before sharing the screen. And now when I play video clips, you will be able to hear the sound on it. Otherwise, remote people don't hear it. You would hear it as the presenter, but you wouldn't hear it in the classroom that you were presenting to. Okay, so these are directions that you can go back to if you need them. They also give you very clear directions on how to use the polls and the Jamboards. So familiarize yourself with those first if you're going to be using those things. But let's begin with this. All right, so one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to ask you to make some decisions. And the first decision we're going to ask you to make is, what kind of pizza do you prefer? Do you prefer plain cheese, or do you prefer it with some kind of topping? And I'm going to ask you too to make sure that you've got your chat box open. Okay, on each one of the slides where there is something you want the participants to collaborate on. All right, there is a link in the chat. If you click on that, it should take you to that Google form that you just saw. So try clicking on that and then answer the questions that you see. So here's the what kind of pizza do you prefer? And the Google poll should have allowed you to make a choice of one or the other. When I'm teaching this in person in a classroom, what I ask the kids to do is to make their choice and then stand in this corner of the room if you like plain pizza, or stand in the other corner of the room if you like one with toppings. And if you can't make up your mind, then you stand in the middle of the room. And so once the kids move to those positions, then I ask one or two people in each position, why do you think that you like cheese pizza best? Why do you like toppings best? Why are you not decided? And I let the maybe 5 or 6 people talk briefly, and then ask anybody if they want to change their position. And you'll see that most kids won't, but maybe one will. And then I let them do that. And we say, all right, so everybody has an opinion about what they'd like. Is there anything wrong with one person liking plain and one person liking toppings? And the answer is always no. And then the other question is, if somebody changed their mind, is there anything wrong with somebody changing their mind? And the answer, of course, is no. And so that's one experience that they have. We do the same thing then quickly with the second screen. We've got more choices now, but which sport is the most fun to play? Again, there's a Google poll there, but the kids in person will go to the 4 different corners of the classroom. And if you don't think that one of those is the most fun to play, but a different one is, then you can go stand in the middle of the classroom. And again, we'll ask maybe one person from each group to keep it short. And then say to them, again, is there anything wrong with one person preferring volleyball and another one preferring basketball? No. Is there anything wrong with not liking any one of those best and choosing something different? No. Will you change your mind over time about what you like best? Probably. Well, all of those things reflect the kinds of decisions people make about everything in their life. And it is okay to have different points of view. And it is okay to change your mind over time. And that's one of the things that happens in our democracy too, is that ideas change over time. The ideas that you young people have about the way the world should be are very different from what my old people would have been like. And that's just part of the process. That's what democracy is like. All right. So now that you've had that experience, we want you to understand that there are many young people your age who actually are showing leadership. Sometimes it's on a local stage, sometimes it's on a state or a national stage, and there are some people who actually have international experience that really make changes in the world. And leaders do things. That's one of the things that is different. Leaders actually take some kind of an action or an activity in order to try to bring about that change. They're not all the same. They do have different personal qualities. And so what we're going to be trying to look at when we look at these 4 leaders is, what are they doing? What are the actions they're taking that can help to bring about the change they want to see? And then what kind of leadership qualities do they have? So what I'd like to literally ask you to do is to have a piece of paper and a pen available or something to write on so that you can record those things. And I would have made sure, if I'm in a classroom, I will give the kids pads of paper and a pencil, so I'm sure that I have all the materials there that they need to do this with. The other option sometimes is to create like a worksheet so that you can pass that out and the kids have the questions in front of them. But right now, you're going to be asked to watch some videos, to look at what they're doing, and to look at what their personality qualities, what their leadership qualities are. So the first one of these is Greta Thunberg.
Greta, your first climate strike was a lonely event a little over a year ago, and in the intervening time you have sparked the interest of millions, literally, of children around the globe demanding action for climate change. What's your message to world leaders today?
My message is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Okay, I'm going to ask you to, on your piece of paper, write down, what is she doing? What are some of the things that Greta is doing that show leadership? And then what are some of her personal qualities that you can tell from that video clip? Now, you can see the way these four are listed. There are 2 left-leaning issues at the right and 2 right-leaning issues at the bottom. I'm going to change that. I'm going to put 1 left, 1 right, 1 left, and 1 right. So I'm going to skip down to Kristen Turner now. And I'll ask you to do that.
When I look into this crowd, I know who you are. I know who you are because we were once all nearly the same. We were all once a single cell, and to the human perception, identical. But nobody could predict how unique and how valuable we all are now and were as that single cell. Again, look at how far we have come. Yes. From that single cell into the concerned and compassionate people that are here today. Yet I know many of the faces I see here also carry pain. Maybe the pain of your friends and loved ones dehumanizing the preborn because they're just clumps of cells, right? Maybe the pain of a past abortion, wishing you could just go back and hold that child. Or maybe the pain of knowing that you have a brother, a sister, an aunt, an uncle, or even a cousin who has been killed by this violent social institution under the guise of progress. This is not progress.
Again, the same thing. What is she doing? And what are some of her personality qualities that allow her to be effective? Her leadership qualities. And then we're going to go on to David Hogg. Same thing. You're looking for what he's doing and what his personality is like.
President Trump acknowledged Wednesday that gun deaths are a public health emergency, but he's sent mixed messages on background checks in recent days. Now, some survivors of the February 2018 shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida are introducing their own plan for sweeping gun control legislation. Our Paula Reed spoke with David Hogg, a survivor of the shooting and one of the founders of the March for Our Lives movement. She asked him about the group's proposal.
What we're asking for is a gun licensing and registration system with annual licensing fees. What we're asking for is mental health services in our communities to address the 2/3 of gun deaths that are suicides in mainly rural and suburban areas that are never talked about when it comes to gun violence. And making sure that we're able to have a real conversation about making sure that the people that shouldn't have guns in the first place can't get them, and also reducing the overall demand and appeal for weapons and violence in the United States.
Okay, same thing. And then the last one is Charlie Kirk.
No, because I've heard you, Charlie, and many others talk about the liberal bias in academia, and I'm really curious, like, what is really driving that? Are students just generally, as Hassan was referencing earlier, more progressive and it's harder for conservatives to get elected? Or are there some other drivers that we need to know about?
There's nothing wrong with this, but people who are more liberal tend to go into academia. And I don't mean that as an insult or anything, it's just truth. Yeah. So right, so that's why academia ends up being more to the left. The commentary we make and the reform where we say we want intellectual diversity and more representation, when you have a country that is split about 40-40 and then 20 in the middle, and academia is 90-10, there's something wrong with that. Now, I'm all for free speech and all. I'm not saying firing professors and all that, but I'm saying adding different perspectives, beliefs, and opinions endowing different professors, different schools that are getting blocked by administration, especially in these different schools of business and finance. You should have an equal representation where people hear both sides of the argument. That's all we're saying.
Why won't the
And then whether, if I'm working in a remote setting like this and there were a lot of people, I would I would set up breakout rooms and let people talk in groups of 5 or 6. But since that's what we are right now, we'll just be able to talk to one another on screen. If I'm in a classroom, I usually break the classroom into small groups and put them in different corners of the room so that everybody has a chance to share. What I'd like to do, and I ask the kids, each one of you, I would like you to share one observation that you made in the course of those 4 little films that you saw. So Ray, you're in the upper left of my screen. Would you be good enough to start?
Yeah, can I move my square to another part of your screen?
Next time you will be.
You know what, truthfully, I thought that the first and last, Greta and Charlie, right, were more emotional than factual to some degree. I did not think they presented, a factual argument, but an emotional argument. Anyway, that was my takeaway.
That's a good observation. Sandra, how about you?
Well, interesting. I thought Greta was speaking very directly to her audience. There was a lot of you in it, and I did find her to be very emotional. I thought Kristen used her body language with her arm motions a lot. David, I think, he had specific requests for policy change. He listed a number of things that Moving On wanted to see accomplished. I thought he was very effective. And I felt that Charlie was looking for balance. He was emotional, but he was looking for balance when it came, comparing conservative versus liberal versus independent, and then how that translates to a college campus.
Thanks. Judith, how about you?
Well, I've done this in a classroom, and I will tell you that some of them didn't recognize Greta Thunberg. They didn't know who she was. And once they heard her speaking, they thought she was a bit dramatic. They were more, maybe it's just, I don't know, they were more critiquing, it like it was a performance. And I don't know that they, truly understood the, what am I going to say, that what they were trying to, what these speakers were trying to do. That's just, that's just from watching I think some of them were young high school students. I don't remember us, maybe in the middle school too. They found Greta very dramatic. They had probably some experience with Kristen and her stance, but you have to say that she does have passion for what she was speaking about. But a lot of hers were, I'm not going to say not factual, but they were kind of skewed. That's just from me as a science person. With David, with the gun control, I've just learned recently that they're changing it from gun control to gun safety. And they liked him. Most of the presentations that I saw in the classroom, they did like David, but also many areas in Northwest Jersey where I am are hunters, and they have gun permits. And, years ago when I worked in a high school in Passaic County, they gave off the first day of hunting season if you brought in a license, and the kids could get off for the day. Interesting to see what kids had guns. But David comes across as a survivor, so there's no doubt, no questioning. He related very well to the kids. He's gotten a little older now, but back then when he made that, that little promo, not promo, I'm sorry, that little video, he was very, you could tell, when we were in the midst of it, back then. And Charlie Kirk, I think for some of them, they were a little bit off because these weren't college students. We were showing them these videos to. They were middle school and high school, and so they were a little bit detached from it. But I did, catch one thing in myself, caught one thing in this where they were talking about the administration blocking the issues or blocking free speech, and that's what we're seeing a lot of now. But that's just, I'm updating my how I see these things through their eyes as well as through my own, as well as they see what's happening. So
good. Well, that was an interesting contribution because I don't think anybody else has taught this in a classroom. So to hear what the kids actually said to you was valuable. Beth, how about you? What did you?
I think they were all like very invested in what they were saying, and that made them believable. It made them relatable. Like some of the issues that, say, I'm not particularly on board with, I would have listened to Kristen, even though I'm not really on board with that at all. But I would have listened to her. There was a presence, I think, that they all had that kind of stood out. And I think it's because they really believed in what they were saying. They're like personally invested in these issues.
Thank you.
So, and that comes across.
Good observation too. Sarah Beth, how about you? You're muted.
I was just impressed with what forceful direct speakers they all were. Lots of practice, of course, but they were incredibly effective. I did see the emotional content coming from Greta and from Kristen, and from Charlie Kirk as well. David Hogg seemed a little more factual and to the point, but I think emotion is important, and that I think Kristen used it very effectively, perhaps in lieu of different perspectives and points of view, but she really got at the jugular for that audience, certainly. And Greta, I know that I was a school psychologist. She's on the spectrum, and I think that's something that maybe seems a little bit off or something to middle school students. But nevertheless, I mean, man, she was telling the truth. Anyway,
that is what you take away from her presentation of it. I love.
And also, she's the youngest one of the group. I mean, it's impressive that she comes on the way she does at her age.
Yeah. This is an aside, Sarah Beth, but one of the points that we make later on is that she is off the spectrum, and that somebody like that can be a leader. That they're, it is affirming to those kids who have challenges to know that there's somebody like them who's been up there and done that. Rita, how about you? What did you take away from?
I have to kind of say pretty much the same thing as everyone. I was really struck by their dedication to their cause. And I think whatever emotion you felt they brought out was because of that dedication. And the other thing that struck me too was how they mostly specifically said, I want this, 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 and this. They let the people know what they were looking for and expecting.
Thank you. Deborah?
Yeah.
I found them all to be very impressive as well. I think they all had passion and had they knew what their goals were in communicating what they wanted to say. I think they all had some kind of emotion that they were connecting with the audience with, especially Kristen. She tried to really connect because I'm sure that's she's run into hostility or some kind of pushback. So connecting the commonality with the audience was important. I thought they used very brief arguments, easy to understand words, a very logical progress through their message. And as Rita said, they were able to list the things that they wanted out of the presentation. So
You're
yeah,
all wonderful students. I said you're all wonderful students because what has happened is that you have actually picked out the things that people need to be aware of when they really want to make a difference. So leadership, I'm going to go back to the slideshow.
Pat, can I just add? Can I
Yes.
add a story?
Sure.
I just it popped in my head that probably 60, 62 years ago, my grandmother gave me a book for my birthday. And the next time I saw her, she asked me what I thought, and I told her I didn't really like it. And she said, I don't care if you liked it. Did the author get his idea across to you? And I was thinking, you know, for those little snippets, I liked the way I liked the way they were able to get their ideas across as the author, without anybody necessarily worrying about whether they liked it or agreed with it, and did they make their point? And they did.
I'm going to steal your story in the future, Ray. Thank you.
That's okay. I think of that often. Every time I read a book that I don't necessarily like, I think back to my grandmother.
Right. And that is what leadership really is you've got to be able to get your point across to other people if you're going to make a difference, if you're going to be a really powerful leader. But not everybody wants to be that. The one thing that I think nobody mentioned in the course of this, and it probably wouldn't have come up, is that all of those people were single issue people. If David Hogg had tried to also be Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ issues and pro-life and academic freedom and all of those things, he probably would have been very ineffective in the gun control or gun safety arena. And the same thing is true for the others. So one of the things we want to try to do today is to narrow down the things that we care about. Now, there are a lot of things that are worth caring about: jobs, justice, healthcare, the environment, immigration, education, war, and you could go on, I'm sure, with plenty of others. Just pick up the newspaper any day. But if you want to be effective at making some kind of change, you can care about all of those things. But if you're going to make a difference, you're going to have to focus on the one thing that you are willing to spend time and effort in trying to make a change. And like I said, it doesn't mean that you don't care about the others, and you can help out in some small way. But if you're going to exercise some kind of leadership, you're going to have to focus. So let's talk about it. Is there a cause that you would march for? And I'm going to hope that this works now. This is the Jamboard. It looks just like the whiteboard that Ray brought up for us before. And if you look down the left-hand side, you'll see that there are a number of icons. There's a pen, an eraser, a pointer, a sticky note. You can add an image to the screen. You can make a circle. You can put in a text box, and then you can just use a laser pointer. So what I'm going to ask all of you to do is to think about, out of all the things you care for, if you had to choose just one, what would it be? And then I'm going to give you the link to this, and you should be able to go here, click on the sticky note, and a sticky note will come up that you can actually write on. So the thing that I would say is civics education, because that's mine. And I can change the color, whatever. And then it gets stuck to the board. And then you can delete things. All right, so I'm going to go back to the slideshow, copy that link. I'm going to put it into the chat. I hope. Now, if you click on that, it should bring you to that slide that I just was showing you. All right, so I can see that almost everybody is on this page. So go over to the left and click on the sticky note yourself.
At the sticky note.
Okay, at any rate, what happens when you're with a class is that you see that there are a whole bunch of issues that people come up with, but what you've got to help people understand is that you can only do one thing well. There we go. I see things in the chat now that are coming up. So this activity kind of forces that thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Go ahead.
Pat,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But the reason I'm interrupting is that for our annual meeting in June, we had a speaker come, Sam Daly Harris, about making democracy work. And he wrote a book and I can't remember the author. Debbie, can you remember maybe? But anyway, that was his premise, is that you can only really focus on one thing. You have to find your why and then go from there.
Good. You're going to hear that. You're going to have to find your why again, too. Good. All of us are saying the same thing. All right. And so the next thing is a poll. And the question in the poll is, and I'm going to ask you to do this in the chat instead of trying to do it on the Google form. So let me just read the things. There are 3 choices that you can make. Can leaders exist if nobody follows them? And one choice is yes, and one choice is no, and the third one is maybe. So I'm going to stop sharing, and in the chat, just write what your answer to that is. Can leaders be leaders if nobody follows them? Okay, we have 1 yes and a bunch of maybes. Judith, why did you say yes?
Well, I'm kind of like Maya Angelou, you know. I do believe that you know, that there is power in what you do as a person, and it's you know, how you make people feel. And I think whether you see your issue in front or they see it in front, at some point what you have done as an example will make people look back to that and think that that's probably the way you do it. Me, I'm an experiential learner. Don't ask me to memorize. Don't ask me to do any of that. But I mean, I'm experiential. So if I experience it, then I feel that I can address the issue. And I always used to tell my kids, if there's a problem, you got to be smart like me, and you got to be able to solve it. Boys, don't use your fists. So.
Okay, Ray, you said no. So give us the other end of the spectrum.
I used to use this when I taught history, and I would always say no, because you can't be a general without an army.
Okay, I would have had an advisor at college who would have said no too. In fact, he challenged me once when I was talking about leadership. He said, you can't be a leader, not, you know, unless people follow you. That's implicit in the term leadership. But there are a whole bunch of you who said maybe. So let's have 1 or 2 people contribute why the maybe. Who wants to be brave and go first?
I was thinking about from the perspective of someone who thinks very deeply about things and maybe writes well about issues, and thinking historically. Nothing comes to mind, but I know that there are people who have over the course of generations and decades, through their writing and their deep thinking, even though they didn't get a band together to rah, 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 or write letters to their senators or whatever, they were so dedicated to a philosophy or a way of thinking that it transcended the ages and, you know, the fluff of having people waving banners and so forth. But the force of their ideas was sustained over time. So people
That-
who them,
yeah.
agree with them, whatever, but they're out there.
Kind of goes back to Ray's story from before, where, you know, does the idea do something to you?
Yeah, that's a connection.
How about somebody who said maybe or in the middle, who wasn't thinking about somebody who was a writer who might have influenced?
I just think that just to hear something and get it put away for you to think about is the beginning of leadership, because you're making someone think about any one particular issue, whether they thought about it or not before.
Okay,
That's
great.
good.
This is one of those other situations where in a physical classroom, I will often have kids go in one corner and another and then in the middle. And in this instance, when I say if anybody wants to change positions, there are always people who change their position just from having listened to what other people say. And so I will then say to the kids, well, what lesson can we learn from that? Is it okay to change your position? You know, do we need to think that we've got to stick to something with, you know, our all guns loaded, or is it okay to change your mind? And the answer, they start walking away with, yeah, we can be much more flexible thinkers than we thought we could be in the past.
I would not suggest using my thought. Can you be a general without an army? Because that was a conversation roadblock.
Yes.
They then thought my position. Oh yeah, he's right. So I didn't get much discussion after that.
Yeah, it's much better if you can pull those things out of the kids in the classroom instead.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a maybe, then certainly you could change. It wouldn't be much of a challenge.
Well, even if you're a yes or a no, I mean, I have had kids move from one corner to the other instead of from one corner to the middle or from the middle to a corner. But it gives you the sense of the fact that you can be open to people's ideas and that you can allow them to influence you. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know, as long as you're making the decision thoughtfully. And by listening to others, you're helping to make decisions thoughtfully. So this is kind of the wrap up slide. So leaders, we all agree, are really only part of the picture. In order to have someone who is an effective leader, who else is needed? And I will often ask the kids for the word and they'll come up with something like supporters. Okay, so when people care about an issue, how can they get involved in making a change? So they can do something dramatic, like leading a protest, or they can do something very mild, like Greta did with her family initially, and that was just discuss the news around their dining room table. But there are many, many other things as well that we can do as citizens if we want to get involved in making a change. So I'm going to hope that this works again. I'm going to put the link in the chat. Okay, can you see that? If you click on that, let's meet at the Jamboard. All right, and it's the same thing. When you care about an issue, what can you do? So take a sticky note and write down what you think individuals can do to make a difference, to be supportive of an issue. That's a good one. We've got a whole bunch of League of Women Voters on here. Now, come on. There's one that should come right smack center of the picture. I'm going to go back through. When we do this in class with kids, I have the actual small sticky note pads that I give out, and the kids take one of those sticky notes, write it on there, and then if this is projected on a whiteboard, they can actually walk up and they put their sticky notes like right on top of one of the X's. And then I can move them so that things are grouped together, like you saw me do on the Jamboard before. And they'll come up with all different kinds of things. Many of them, because they're young, will have to do with social media of some kind, like I'll make a TikTok or I'll share something on Instagram or whatever. But the one that I was expecting this group to come up with was to vote about an issue to make a difference. But there are all kinds of things that we can do. So where do we start? Well, one of the things that we need to understand is that there are different levels of government where different issues are addressed. And sometimes an issue is addressed at every single level. So if we talk about the environment, for example, the national government can get us involved in accords that connect internationally, like the climate accord. On a state level, actions can be taken, like laws can be passed. Here in New Jersey, we had the law passed where plastic bags can no longer be used in businesses. On the county level, we have commissioners who make decisions based on like are we going to have a new county park? And if so, then how are we going to make the park be as an environmentally friendly as possible? Or if it's a county college, how are we going to make sure that the things stay neat? So we're going to put in both recycling containers and trash containers and make them attractive so that the kids will actually use them. But also on a municipal level, there are towns that will make laws or school districts that will make laws. School districts around here, for example, made the change from using plastic straws to using paper straws in the cafeteria in an effort to cut down on plastic waste. So when you've got an issue that you care about, you need to start thinking about what level of government can make the kind of change that I want to see. Maybe my change is really big and it's going to have to be at the national. When we work with kids, we encourage them to really think carefully and try to find something on the municipal or the school district level where they can see that they've had an impact if they try to make some kind of a change, whatever their issue might be. And if not, then we can work up to the state and the county. So just to refresh their memories about who's at the different levels of government, at the national level, we're talking about Washington, D.C. now. The executive is the president and the vice president. That's the executive branch and all the people that they appoint to different agencies. We also have the Senate and the House of Representatives. And those are people who come from our states and go to Washington to represent us. At the state level, we have different representatives. We have a governor who's like the president, so it's like the executive, and a lieutenant governor in New Jersey. Not every state has a lieutenant governor. We have a Senate and we have an assembly. And those are not the same senators and assembly people that go to Washington. There is a state senator that's elected from each one of the districts in the state. And there are 2 assembly people who go to Trenton to make state level decisions. At the city or town level, there is usually a city or town council or board, and there is a mayor. And sometimes you get to elect the mayor, but sometimes the board elects the mayor. At the county level, there are people known as commissioners. Usually that's the name for them, who make decisions about county level issues like county jails, the county clerk who keeps records for the county, the county colleges and the county parks and all of those kinds of things are in their purview. And then there's the school board level, and the members of the school board are generally elected by the public in that particular community. And usually that board elects its president, so that we don't directly elect the president of the board. But those are the people, those people that are listed under each one of those levels of government. Those are the people that we want to try to influence if we're going to try to make a change about your issue. All right, so who are those people? There is a website called Common Cause. And if you put in your email address, your street address, don't pay attention to what's on the top there. But if the kids have their phones, I actually have, and not every school allows it, but when they allow them, I say, all right, this is legitimate. Take out your phone, ignore where they're asking you for their email address, and just put your full address in at the bottom. I'm going to put mine in, and if you've got your phone with you, you can actually do this yourself to find your own representatives. But Common Cause has every single representative, federal, state, local, listed. So you can see that the president and the vice president, Cory Booker happens to be my senator. Menendez, who has recently resigned, is my US senator as well. So there will be a new person appointed there. And then Frank Pallone is my assembly person in the federal government. Then we go to Phil Murphy, Tahisha Way. Sean Golden is county. There's more county people. So I can find the actual names of those people who are my representatives. And if you go to if you click on the link that says information, you can see that you can get the information so that you can contact that person. There's an email address and there's also a phone number. So once you've decided what your issue is and what level of government you're going to have to address to work on your issue, then you can find out who the actual person is by going to commoncause.com. You can also find out how your representatives have voted. And that can be important if you want somebody to help you with a bill that you are trying to get passed. Let's say, I'm going to use an example that the kids in Energizing Young Voters did. They said, you know, great, kids should be civically engaged, but we can't because we don't have the time to do it. Or if only kids with, you know, who live in advantaged situations can do it because they can do something on the weekends or they can, you know, get time off during the summer to do it or whatever. If I'm a kid who has to work or has to take care of my siblings because my parents are working, I can't get involved in civic activities. So the kids said, all right, we want to have a bill passed or into law that will allow us to have a day of excused absence each year so we can do some kind of civic work. And they did some research. They found that in Virginia, a similar law had been passed, and they got to work on finding people whose positions in the past they thought would support that. So they first thought, well, okay, people who are on education committees on these things are probably going to be the one. So you can go to govtrack.us. I'm going to put my address in again. And I'm going to use Cory Booker. I'm going to show his legislative profile. And if you slide down, you can see where he stands in terms of the issues and what he has co-sponsored. If you click on any one of those links, you're going to see who he's worked with. And the other thing that you can do is go to Legiscan. And you don't need to pay anything for this. It's free. But you can register for free. And then for your state, so Sarah Beth, I'm going to put in New Jersey just because that's where I am. But when you put in legiscan.com / and then your state, you can find a way to search for all bills. So you can use the bill number or you can do the full text. So one of the things our kids are working on right now is they want to have a month like Hindu Heritage Month. So I'm going to put that text in there, hit search, and up come the bills that that are currently being considered. Right? Once you know that, then you can find out who's the support for that. Right? This one was, it doesn't even show, all right. Here are the sponsors for the bills. So you get to know who the people are who are making the kinds of decisions that you want them to make for you. So those are two really valuable resources for you. The govtrack.us and legiscan.com / whatever your state is.
Hey, Pat.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I've also been to nj.gov to watch you can look at the schedule for all the different committees, and I've spent some time watching the education committee, And I watched for a whole day because it turned out to be for most of the day when for the freedom to read legislation. And it was fascinating. I mean, it was a beautiful day, and I spent the whole day watching the procedure.
That's great, and you can do that. You can also go in person, and you can sit and listen to them debate in at the actual state legislature. And I don't know, Ray, if you were on when they did. One of our young ambassadors was testifying that day. His name was Hoyne Lee, and he just blew people away. He looked like he looked kind of like Andy Kim, you know, who was picking up the garbage after the January 6th thing. He stood in those halls with all the confidence in the world, telling the world why he felt that law shouldn't, or that bill shouldn't be passed. So it was impressive. But those are some of the resources that you can use when you're trying to work on your particular issue. There is another website that I found that I am really intrigued by. It's called A Starting Point, and it allows you to hear opinions on both sides of an issue. And the reason that I think that's important for kids to know is because if they're going to be working on an issue, they also have to anticipate what the pushback is going to be. So they need to understand what the other side of the question is. And by going to A Starting Point, you can begin to get a sense of that. And once you know some of the people that are making a stand on a particular issue, you can find out more about their point of view, as well as begin to do some research on your own to follow up on what you've learned from those people. At your local level, because remember we said we try to encourage kids to work on something local because they're much more likely to see and to have an impact. So what's an example of that? Well, in my town, there were the high school is on one side of a very busy road, and the parking lot for the high school is on the other side of this busy road. And there are crossing guards and there are stripes, but there was still an accident and a kid got hit by a car going from one side to the other. So the students in the school petitioned first the school board, and they could only do a certain amount there. And the school board said, well, go talk to the town, go to the municipality and see if you can get them to make a change. So they did. They learned how to make a 3-minute presentation to the town council. And what they asked for was very specific. They wanted not just a crossing guard and the stripes, but they wanted flashing lights that would go on anytime somebody began to walk across that stripe thing. They also, in addition, asked for a speed bump at that spot. So not just the crosswalk, but the speed bump. And they got both of them. So they
got a speed bump?
Yep, they got a speed bump at both ends of the high school, the street where the high school is, and where the building area is. So and it's a big speed bump. Let me tell you, you don't go over there fast without losing the bottom of your car. So people learn very quickly to slow down, and then those flashing lights go on when people are ready to cross. So they saw that there was, they could really influence things, make a difference. So how do you do this? How do you find out about these things? Well, if you want to go to the city or the town council, each one of them has a website, as does the Board of Education. And when I'm working in schools, what I try to do before I go in, if I'm in person, the town, like the last one that I went to was Asbury Park. So what I did was to load Asbury Park's website on the link so that people would see, okay, this is their website and this is all the information you can find. You know who all of your members are, you know the commissions, you can get the city calendar so you know when there are board meetings, so they can see it actually happening. So they can find out from the website a lot of information about who's there to be influenced and when can they go, how do they make their point. And the same thing is true with Board of Education. every one of them has a website. You can see all of the information that's available to them, and the calendar, which will tell them usually when board meetings are, so they know that they can go to the board meeting and where it is. All right, so that's if you are using this particular thing. You can take the slideshow, copy it, and then you can change the links so that it reflects the district that you're going into. Then we say to the kids, you can actually go to those public meetings. You can express your position in that public session, because there is a part of every meeting that is set aside for the public to give input to the members of the elected body. They probably won't answer whatever you say, but they will listen to you. And they will take what you say under advisement. So don't expect to get an answer that day, but make sure that you can say specifically what you wanted to say. Remember what all of you said about like the kids that were, those young people who were leaders, how clear they were about what they wanted to see. That's what you need to do. You need to be ready to do.
Pat, can I just say something? Those people those young people that we saw as leaders, the one thing I noticed about each and every one of them was that they had prepared speeches. You know, those were things that they did over and over again. So they were well prepared with their information as well as facts, as well as research. And I think that's very important. That's the key. But they also need somebody to help them move their agenda or their cause.
Right. They need those people who are supporters, and the supporters don't need to be people like under them. It can be a senator, a state senator, or a mayor or somebody like that. Now, they also need to know that if they can't get there to see what's going on in person, most meetings are virtual now.
Yeah.
And if they can't see it virtually, there are always minutes that they can read afterwards. And this is something that I think is pretty important. And Ray, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was on a board of education, there was always something that we called a work session. Sometimes it was before the actual meeting, sometimes it was a different night.
Yeah.
And because we were under the sunshine law rule, we had to advertise those meetings, and people could come and sit and listen. They couldn't speak to us, but they could sit there and listen to our conversation among the board members. And they could then, if you're a person who wants to make an impact and wants to make that statement at the public meeting, once you've heard the thinking that the people who are going to be making the decision have expressed, you can better address the specific things that they you might want them to know. So going to work sessions, I found, was a valuable way to gain more information that made my position stronger. Ray, is that still the case? I know you're on the board up in Newton.
Yes and no. I know where I where I work, Vernon, they have work sessions. In Newton, we operate as a board of the whole, which means we have both of our meetings are essentially work sessions. And I mean, the initial public period is agenda items only, and then a second public portion is anything you want to talk about. And often that session is about what we discussed at the table.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So in that case, if you just went to the regular meeting, you would hear the same kinds of things. When I was on a board, we had a committee structure too, and it was much more difficult, I felt, for the public to really know what was going on behind the scenes. So I like the fact that you were board of a whole as a whole. Okay, but at any rate, what the kids need to know is that there are times when they can get information. They just can't talk at that particular meeting, but they can use the information.
But
Right,
one of the,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, one of the cool things in New Jersey, school boards, now it's a mandate that we have a young person, you know, high school student pretty much, but a young person that's also sits on the board, sits at the table with us. Not a voting member, but an opinion expresser.
Yes. Yes. I think that was a remarkably forward-looking move when, kids are the ones who are the beneficiaries of the decisions that are made by a Board of Education. So it seems to me they should have a say. And I don't know if all of you are aware of it, but New Jersey, in Newark, New Jersey, which is a large urban area, and it has had about a 5% turnout rate for Board of Education elections, just changed the law, and they will now allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in the Board of Education election. So that is going to be a remarkable, it's really going to be interesting to watch and see. As long as the kids recognize that they have that kind of ability and have the skills in order to make good voting decisions, I can see that could have a very positive impact on the education that kids in Newark are getting. But we'll see. There's now a movement afoot to make Vote New Jersey 16. There's a bill that was just proposed. There's an assembly bill and a Senate bill. So they're companion bills to have all municipalities in the state of New Jersey allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in their Board of Education elections. So we'll see what happens to it. But at any rate, to begin to wrap up this idea of having an issue and knowing that there are different places that you can go to be an influencer to try to make a change in what is going to happen in the future is important. But it's still up to you to know what you are ready to do. Most people fall somewhere in between being a really strong leader, no matter what level you're talking about, and someone who is more comfortable supporting a leader. It doesn't matter where you are. It just matters that you're doing something to try to bring about the change that you want to see in your own world. Both leaders and supporters are needed. And you decide on your own level of engagement. Think back to those young leaders in the video clips, and we talked about this. How effective would Greta have been if she tried to address all of the issues that were expressed, or any of the other young people who were there? And then there's another piece that's important for these kids to know. Young people today tend to be pretty dark about the future because they don't think that their government is being responsive to them, and they don't think that they have any real voice in what's going to happen. That can wind up creating a mental health crisis for some. But there are young people who are also really wonderful role models who've recognized in their own lives that the pressure was getting to them and they needed to step back. So if you as a young person are really involved in some kind of an issue and you begin to feel as if you're getting depressed about it, step back and get help. That's what Naomi Osaka did. She was a tennis player who stood up for Black Lives Matter, got a lot of very, very negative press as a result of it, and she just needed to back away. She stopped giving press conferences until she got herself together again. And now she's back and doing fine. Simone Biles, if you've been watching the Olympics, you have seen her amazing comeback. But in the Olympics in Tokyo, she needed to drop out. She had worked for years and years and years to get to that point. But the Olympics Commission had required her to stop her medication for ADHD. And as a result, her sense of herself in her body, it's called the twisties, but her sense of where her body is in space was affected. And so it was not physically safe for her to do the routines that she was accustomed to doing. So rather than hurt herself, she was willing to step out and step back and say, I'll do it the next time. And so she has. All right, so what's your issue? I hope that you have been able to find it, that you know what you really want to make a change in, and that you have a way to start, even if you think it's really small, even if it's just among your family and your friends, or just in your school or just in your community, because even small changes have a positive impact on the future, and the rewards for all of us are great. You can make a difference. The one that builds on that is I am the change. And now this is the actual practical, this is how we do it. So I showed you the middle school version before. And this is the high school version. Now, when you look at the film strip, you'll see this time that I have hidden several of the slides, and you'll probably see that they're pretty much, you've seen them before. So this is the slide that we would actually begin with. And if you've hidden them ahead of time, that is the first slide that you'll see. This is where we would begin if we had already gone through the what's your issue and you're doing the high school version. So this is the question. So how do you do this? How do you exercise your power and your knowledge to change in society, either whether you're going to be a leader or a supporter? Civic action is defined as all of the things that people do to bring about social and political change. And that can mean anything from doing a registration drive or voting yourself, through much more dramatic actions like doing in a march or taking part in civil disobedience or something like that. Civic action is a process, and you'll learn how the process works, and it requires a plan, and you'll learn how to make one. And we have an acronym, IAM, the change, and we've obviously read as I am the change. The I stands for inform, the A for act, and the M for monitor. All right, so let's talk about the I first, the inform. Obviously, it's really, really important to always get the most reliable and the most accurate information that you can about whatever it is that your issue is. Bias isn't always bad, and there's an article linked there, because we need to know not just what we think, but what other people think as well about our issue, if we're going to be able to defend it. So first, inform yourself, get the facts and figures from reliable sources, and then, just like those young people did, state the problem as clearly as you can possibly do it. What is it that you want to see? Learn as much as you can about each one of those solutions, and make the solution something that is observable. And then try to get others to join with you, or find somebody who's already working on the issue and join them. So how do you find issues? How do you find out what is accurate and what is not accurate? This chart comes from an organization known as Ad Fontes Media. It is a 501c3, so they are in the education business. They are not proselytizing. They are trying very hard to make sure that good decisions are being made about what the reliability is of a source and what way it leans. And to do that, they have teams of 3 people that are hired to look at 10 different pieces from a particular source. Now, that might be a newspaper, or it might be a podcast, or it might be a TV show, or any other communications media. Those 3 people get 10 different sources, and they each have to read them or watch them or whatever it is, and make a decision about how reliable it is. So they need to figure out where from top to bottom on this chart it would fall, and how biased it is, or how right. And then all 3 of those people, so somebody who's a very right-leaning person, somebody who's left, and somebody who's center, have to agree that all 10 of those things fall at this particular spot on the chart. So when you, and there's also a search engine that I'll tell you about in a second so that you can find what the source that you're looking for. The other thing I'll tell you is that this organization updates this chart monthly, and they're always adding new pieces of new sources that they investigated. There is a film clip that I have available to you that you can use if you want to see what the process is actually like. And they actually have lessons that they will provide to you so you can teach kids how to do what their teams do. And then once those decisions are made, then the source is placed on the chart. That placement could change next month if 10 articles or whatever come out with a different lead, for example, or a different level of reliability. So it's a really, there's an app, you can have it on your phone, you can use it for whatever you're looking at, but from top to bottom, at the top is what is just typically straight fact reporting, no opinion at all. And as you move down, you have some mixed analysis. As you move down further, you might have a much wider variation in reliability, much more opinion as you move on down. Sometimes you actually get down to the bottom where there is actually misleading or inaccurate information that is often used in that particular source. And then there, the center line is the actual centrist position, and anything to the left of that is increasingly left-leaning, and anything to the right of that is increasingly right-leaning. Sarah Beth, you have your hand raised. What's the question?
Yes, I just wanted to state that I participated in a webinar put on by the News Literacy Project a few months ago, which is they do, you know, they have journalists, local journalists talking about what the issues are and trying to keep up to date with presenting the news in what is it, news deserts and so on. They really objected to this media bias chart.
Oh, really?
And, yes, and I'm, again, this was a few months ago, and I'm not sure that I'm stating their position very accurately here, but they thought that it, and it also may depend on how thoroughly you use this process here that you're describing. I mean, really getting into it and analyzing things. But their sense was that when people tend to rely on this, it diminishes the role of journalism to do the best they can at thoroughly researching issues. It discounts the integrity of some journalists because it leads people to believe, yeah, well, that's left wing or that's right wing or something like that. So that was sort of their main point. And again, I could research this more thoroughly. I just did want to state it. So that's all.
Yeah, I'm glad that you did. I get, while you were speaking, my mind was rolling, and what I'm thinking is, if I am an independent journalist, I can see why I might object to having an organization say what my work is, where my work falls.
Yeah,
and I get that. So I think that has to be recognized.
Right, and it's, you know, there's a notion that it's undermining the neutrality of the typical, you know, independent day-to-day journalist. But,
yeah. And there really is a lack, or lack's not the word that I'm looking for. There is a real concern about the fact that local journalism is disappearing.
Yes.
That,
huge.
you know, it's
importantly the women voter issue. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's really a good point. What I don't think it negates what this particular bias chart does, or what any bias chart does, as long as it's done as scrupulously as this particular one does. because I think it's very helpful for a number of reasons to know whether the sources that we're using are changing the way we're viewing the world, or if we have an opinion and we know, for example, let me go on to the next slide. On this slide, every day in my inbox, I get the Dispatch, which is down here, which is a right-leaning blog, and I get Reuters summary of the news. So those are the two things that are influencing my thinking all the time. But let's say that wasn't what it was. Let's say I just read the Wall Street Journal and the Boston Herald or the Rasmussen reports. It would really be helpful for me to know that I'm looking at things through a right-leaning lens, and that I probably, in order to make good judgments, need to know what people on the other side are saying. And when we talk with the kids about trying to make their position clear, they need to know what people on both sides of the issue are saying about this so that they can make the case for what it is that they're trying to get past or trying to get across. We also encourage them not to, I'm going to go back one, not to discount the things that are down here, because these sources are sometimes all that other people hear or watch. And so if you're going to make a point, even if you are using the most reliable sources to make your point, if you know what's being said down here, you'll be prepared, better prepared, if somebody comes at you with an argument that you think is not a valid argument. If you don't know ahead of time, it can blow you out of the water if you're not anticipating. So we really encourage the kids to use this chart, not just to say this is good and this is bad, but instead to say, all right, where can I get information that is going to help me make my case? And then where can I get information that's going to help me rebut any arguments that might come my way? And I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but I was pleased when I saw this and I went to this and I went, oh, good. I'm looking at one that's slightly left leaning and one that's just slightly right leaning, so I guess I'm getting a pretty good balanced view of what happens in the world each day. And I would recommend to you, if you have not looked at those two, if you can, they're both apps. The Dispatch is free and so is the AP Reuters. And it can sometimes help to balance things in your mind if you are, like my husband is one who goes down rabbit holes when he starts looking at what Apple News puts in his feed each day. And I'll say to him, what's the source? What's the source? What's the source? And bring him back to this. So it can be helpful just in life in general. And when kids are writing papers for something other than doing this for themselves, they know that they can find some reliable sources for the work that they're doing. Those are the two QR codes. If you want to, you can take a snapshot of them and you can get it for yourself. If not, this is on the slideshow that's on the website and you know where you can go to get back to it. Okay, now we are not going to have enough time to do a really deep dive on this, but I want to show you what we do if we've got extra time that we can work with a class for more than one period. This is a Jamboard that starts a conversation. So we ask kids in the classroom for themselves to take that issue from the first lesson and say, all right, frame it as, what's the problem that you don't like about today's world? What would you like to see different? So for me, the problem was that kids don't understand how government works and they don't know why it's important to vote. They think their country's failing them and that they have no power to change. So that's the problem. So my solution is that schools should teach civics. So we give kids a chance to do that, to do just that much of it. And what I'd like to ask you to do is to do just that much of it on the issue that you chose in the first part of the lesson. So what is the problem and what's the solution that you'd like to see? And try to keep the solution to only a few words if you can. It should be something you can actually see. So you can see whether or not schools are teaching civics, for example. Okay, and then we try to help people clarify what that really means to them. So if you look at your short statement about what the solution is and think about it in relationship to what I've put up here, I took each one of the words individually and then I went down to the why. The question, who was it that said before the question of why? You know, why bother? Why should I even care that schools should teach civics? And my why that I'm going to keep in mind the whole time I'm working on this is because as citizens, we need to know how to be engaged in the democracy, voting and taking actions that will make the world change the way we think it should be. All right, so to do this, if I'm looking at this and I'm talking about schools, I need to be more specific. What level am I talking about? Elementary, middle, high school? Well, it turns out that in New Jersey, we've just had a law that requires civics in middle schools passed. So I'm probably not going to worry about that. But I really worry about the fact that when I go into high schools, kids don't, even when they're seniors, they're not really ready to vote. They have all kinds of anxiety about it. If many of them have anxiety about it, and we're trying to get that changed, and they don't really understand how the process works to get a bill passed, for example. So my preference would be to have it some kind of a change in high school. And I've had people say to me, okay, well, it should be senior year. And I say, I don't know, because there are an awful lot of kids who, by the time they get to be seniors, they're not in history courses anymore. And in New Jersey, they're not required to have a course in their senior year that's a social studies course, which means that we have to look down like to junior year and sophomore year when there is a requirement. I am always concerned about kids who are dropouts because those are kids also who need to learn how to use the democratic process. So the age of 16 in New Jersey is the dropout age. So I would personally like to see something in high school in sophomore year. So that's where the word schools is going to change for me. All right, the word should implies that there's some kind of a law about it. Who's going to make the schools do that? Well, our Department of Education can mandate courses and they can create state standards that have to be met for graduation. So it might be that we need to not approach the New Jersey legislature, but rather approach the Department of Education. So that's something I need to keep in mind. And then when you talk about teaching, how are you going to do it? Should it be part of a course or should it be a standalone course? What are the advantages and disadvantages of each? And then when you talk about civics, what kind of content and what kind of skills do the kids need to have? And to my way of thinking, it has to be knowledge of how government works. So I think what I'd like you to see is that I tried to break down each word so that I have a better sense in my own head of what I actually mean when I say schools should teach civics. Now I could change that and say, in high schools, a civics course in sophomore year would include instruction in voting and in civic engagement, and I could go on from there. So what I'd like you to do is to take your very short statement and try to clarify it for yourself in your own mind so that when you go before somebody to ask them to make a change, you have a very clear picture for yourself of what that change is going to be.
I'm not quite sure. Are we doing this in order to teach kids or for ourselves?
For yourself right now, for yourself.
Okay.
So
all right.
that you have
I figured that, yeah.
I'm going to give you about another minute, and then I'm going to ask if you will share your statement with us. Okay. All right, Rita, are you willing to share what you've come up with so far? And please know that nobody is expected to have this perfect. There's no way
No,
that you will ever
hardly perfect.
So,
let me just preface real quick and say mine came from the fact that I have twin grandsons who have cerebral palsy. All right, they're doing fine. There's a lot of good things going on with them. Okay, however, mine was I would like to have the state to fund and open more disciplinary schools for multiply handicapped students so they can experience a smaller school setting.
thank you. Beth, how about you? How did you? You're muted.
Well, I go back to the mental health issues, and I always find it so disheartening because statistics have shown that, we talk about anxiety and what creates it in civics, et cetera, et cetera. But and knowledge is power. Having said that, I'm just gonna just make a suggestion that when you say that you want to teach civics in school, we're going to need more teachers. We're going to need more teachers who are better prepared to teach about government. And then we're going to have to get the courses introduced into the curriculum, and it's going to have to be approved by the Department of Education. And I find that the same thing with anything else that I've ever suggested. We have so many kids in school I worked in a high school where we had one death every year for 7 years. And shooting, guns, hanging, all those kind of things. And I find that when I went back to statistics, 22% of the kids between the ages of 9 and 17 have a serious mental health issue that includes ADD, ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about kids with physical handicaps or whatever, they have a comorbidity of depression and anxiety. We try and give them medications, and we try to put them in school, and we try to teach them. So it's very, to me anyway, it's very disheartening. And I know we've worked on it in all different angles and whatever, developing 504 plans for them. The schools just can't answer all those.
Okay, I'm
those
going to introduce you. I interrupt you for a second though. I get totally what you're saying, but
I'm off on a tangent. Sorry.
If you're going to try to make a change, try to put into a few words exactly what just one thing you would like to see different.
I would like to see students have more access to mental health facilities, either in school-based or school-linked clinics.
Okay, that's what you want to write down, just that. So capture that for yourself and put that down on your paper.
We've tried it, I know, sorry.
Okay, but write it down. That's what we're going to work with.
Yeah, okay.
Beth?
Oh, mine was a larger scale because it was women's health care and pro-choice. And the only way to do that is a constitutional amendment because it's up to the states individually. So that's what I had put on the sticky board, and that's all I have. So I don't know how to do that.
All right, but you would like to see a constitutional amendment passed.
Right, to guarantee women's right to choose for their health care.
Okay, try to narrow that, try to capture that on a piece of paper. Sarah Beth, how about you?
Well, mine was the same issue, and I didn't I didn't think about the constitutional amendment, that mine was more to convince state legislatures to make reproductive rights safe and available and legal, and the best way to do that would be to vote.
Okay, Ray, how about you?
Actually, it's funny because an email popped up from the New Jersey School Board's delegate assembly, and so that's coming up, and school boards can put their issue out there. And I'm on the legislative committee, so we sort of screen what might work, what might not work, what's appropriate, what's not. And I'm going to push for a little bit more. I would like to see the suggestion that school board elections are nonpartisan have a little more teeth for New Jersey school boards, so that our school board elections are truly nonpartisan.
Good.
I know that I've seen. I know that at this or that this or that party has offered monetary support for folks that are running for school boards on particular with particular agendas, and I think the the meat, the teeth rather, in that school boards are nonpartisan has to be policed. In most cases, it's we can suggest it, but we really can't do anything about it. And I think we can, because we all have to report where our contributions are coming from. And I think the way to put more teeth in is that you cannot have contributions from any political party.
I think
So
that's yeah.
I didn't know. I don't know if I stated that very well, but that's where I'm going.
Well, I think when we get to the next part, I think you would need to be a little bit more focused on it. But I think the end of what you said is really what you're looking for. You're looking for some kind of legislation or something like that that will require school board candidates to not accept donations from partisan organizations. Is that a more succinct way of saying it? Good. Okay.
A fair synopsis, yes.
Okay, good. So you've each gotten to the point where you can pretty clearly state the thing that you want to see. And that's what you're going to communicate to whatever level of government needs to hear it. Now, if you're trying to address the national government, it's going to be a whole lot harder than if it's something you're trying to do on a state level or on a local level. But it's still doable. You can still make a difference by starting to make your voice heard, because the more legislators hear the same message, the more likely the message is to get through. So the next part of the activity talks, and I'm going to kind of rush my way through this because we're getting close to the end. The next part of the activity has kids choose, do you want to write a letter? Do you want to write an email? Do you want to make a phone call? Or do you want to actually testify? And once that decision is made, then they're set to work on beginning to draft whatever it is they're going to use. Now, I'm going to show you the video that one of our college students made to talk to kids about how do you write a letter that's going to be impactful. So give me a second while I get to that. This is on the take action part.
Hey guys, my name's Justin. I'm here with St. Edward's University telling you a little bit about contacting your elected representatives. The first thing you need to do is find out who your representatives are. To do that, there's a lot of great websites online, like the one at Common Cause, where you can type in your address or even just your zip code, and they'll tell you all your representatives in the government, whether that be the president all the way down to your local railroad commissioner. After that, you need to figure out who to contact based on your issue. For instance, you wouldn't contact a state representative about immigration policy because that's a federal issue. They can't really do much about that. So you just need to do a little poking around online to figure out where your issue falls on the spectrum, if it's federal, state, or local. After that, you need to decide on the method of communication. Usually the best ones to do are phone calls and letters. A phone call shows that you're interested. If you call in, you might even be given to a full-time staffer that handles the issue, and you could have an informed conversation with them about it. And a letter shows that you took the time to sit down and physically write out your problems, and it's more likely to get you on the office's radar as a concerned citizen. Also, that letter will be photocopied and attached to whatever management database they use for their constituent contacts. They'll attach that photocopied letter to your entry. And then finally, before you go ahead and send it in, I recommend that you look it over and make sure that what you're writing is clear, intelligent, and concise. You don't really want to send anything in that's jumbled or not put together, because it just won't look good, and it's a bad way to start off a relationship with that government office. So on that note, good luck contacting your government representatives, and remember, that's the best way to influence change.
Gotta love him.
Yeah.
All right. So the next step then that we want you to do is, you've made the choice, I hope. Phone call, letter, you're going to testify in place, in person, or what are you going to do? In any case, you're going to begin to draft the beginning of that communication. And I have the kids do this too. And I tell them it is not going to be perfect. And we just want you to start getting things down on paper so that you can start the process. And once I'm going to ask you to do that, and I'll give you about 3 minutes to do it. And then once we're done with that, the kids connect, they work with one another, and they help to refine what's down there so that the message is clearer. But I'm going to give you 3 minutes now. It's 3:17. So at 3:20, I'm going to stop you. And in those 3 minutes, I hope you get the beginning of your first communication to get this goal accomplished, done. Okay, finish whatever the sentence was that you just started writing. Okay, so I hope that you've got at least several sentences written down. And what we ask the kids to do now, we pair them up and we say, all right, you read your statement to your partner. And your partner has to first tell you one thing that they really like about what you said. So is there somebody who's willing to read their statement so we can tell you what we really like about it?
I'll go.
Thank you, Rita.
Dear State Department of Education, having grandsons who are multiply handicapped, I'm concerned about their continuing education in the public schools. There are very few alternative schools in central New Jersey that address these issues.
Okay, that's all about what she said.
That she included.
Sorry.
She identified the reason that she's interested.
Okay, and it's a personal story. That was the first thing that jumped to my mind was good start, Rita. It's a personal story. And so they know that this is going to be impactful on you. So anybody else want to read the couple of lines, and we can give you some feedback on the positive part of it? No? Okay, the next thing that we would do in the partners, so the whole class isn't hearing this when we do it. Remember that. It's just two people working together. So they each tell each other something positive. And then you say, all right, when you give somebody suggestions, the suggestions are not criticisms. What you want to do is to help somebody make what they're saying even more powerful. So make a suggestion that's going to help that person improve what they wrote even more than what it is right now. And then we ask the same thing. So I'm going to make Rita the guinea pig, and I think her start was spectacular. I think if you can compress it, make it shorter than 2 or 3 sentences, and just still make it your family story, that's going to get you more bang for the buck. Because if you can bullet something, if you give a legislator, they don't want to read a whole lot. So you want to make it short and sweet and to the point. So that's my suggestion for you. And then you would have the kids switch roles so that they all get the ability to hear and be heard for what they're going to say. I want to give you just a quick view of what the other slide is. Well, this was the act part. And then the next step after acting is the communication, which you've done. And then there's a whole section on what happens? This you can leave out if you run short on time. But I do want to show you this quick thing because this is up for grabs. If you know a school district that might be interested in using this asynchronous version of IAM the Change, which was built on what you've just read, we can arrange that. The person who developed this is a company that's looking to pilot it to see what would happen. But
welcome to this digital learning experience presented by Legal.
To the part about a bill.
Remember, legislators work for you and other constituents in your district. Since you are their constituent and they want to be reelected, they will fight for popular issues important to voters. Let them know what you want. One way to create change is to ask them to sponsor a bill and work to have it become law. You can make suggestions to help them craft the bill so the language in the bill does what you want it to do.
All right, and then I'm going to go up to...
Remember, you can influence the outcome by staying vocal. You need to make sure you communicate. Contact your representative to sponsor your bill. Your legislator will research the issue and come back with an answer. If the representative disagrees, then you go back to the drawing board to do more research and try a different approach. If the legislator agrees with your proposal, the two of you move forward. The legislator agrees with your proposal. Now what? Your legislator will now find sponsors for the bill. A committee is assigned to your bill and it goes up for debate. During all of this, you stay vocal and encouraging. Prepare testimony. Provide questions. Write letters to news editors. Attend hearings. Wear buttons, stickers, and t-shirts. You get the idea. So, the bill makes it out of committee. Now what? When the committee has approved or amended the bill, it goes back to the Senate or General Assembly for the second reading. After this, it is up to the Senate President or Assembly Speaker to schedule a debate and vote on the bill.
Yeah.
Then a vote is taken.
All right, and it goes
Bills
on,
at the federal and state level have to be...
It goes on from there, and it walks the kids through the whole process of having a bill passed, whether it's at the federal level or at the state level. So that, like I said, that's available for anybody who might want to try it out in a classroom setting.
What's the name of it again? It was the identifier?
It is the, it's IAM the Change. It's this lesson, but that was developed as a synchronous and asynchronous lesson by Connect for Education, which generally does college level courses, but they wanted to try this one out and see how it worked. So, okay, we are close to closing. Any last minute questions or comments? Any other conversations or questions?
I just love how we're going through this process. You're making us think, and you're inspiring us to make our kids think. So it's good.
Okay. And you can really do it. You know, yes. That's the nice thing. Reach out with any questions that you may have. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.